Imagine a lunar penal colony rebelling after a century of Earth control, guided by a self-aware computer who values friendship, freedom, and humor. I'm Space Admiral Candace.
I'm Shane, Space Cadet, second class.
You are listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod. Today we're chatting about The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Robert Heinlein's 1966 classic about life on the moon in the year 2075. Our visiting dignitary today is Kevin Thompson, cyber law expert and founder of the legal and other professional sci-fi and fantasy readers book club.
You got it.
Welcome, Kevin.
Welcome, Candace and Shane.
That was a very long title.
That's a long title there.
Right. I started initially through my stuff with the Law Practice Management Committee at the Chicago Bar and expanded it to other professionals. And it was the best way I could figure out to let other people know you didn't have to be a lawyer to geek out about good sci-fi. So,
yeah.
Just like a lawyer.
Based on the people who I've invited on to discuss science fiction books, you don't even really need to be a sci-fi super geek to enjoy sci-fi.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
There's a range of options out there for people. People can get their geek on in whatever fashion that strikes their fancy.
That's the thing that I've enjoyed the most about this podcast is the books that I'd never even heard of before that we've had a chance to read. It's been a lot of fun.
This one's one of my favorites. This is one I come back to every couple of years or so, just dip my toes back into this particular world, and it's always fun to do so.
Okay, so tell us why you picked this book. You chose The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Yes, this is one of my favorites. I keep coming back to it, and it's hard to explain just exactly why. You kind of need to immerse yourself into it a little bit. There's a bit of a learning curve when you get into it because the main character, Manny, speaks in a dialect, and it comes across, a little bit different when you're first reading it, but you eventually pick up his lingo. But he's a very compelling character. And along the way, he's a computer technician. And he realizes that the main computer in this penal colony is a sentient computer that's become self-aware. And he befriends Mike. It gives him a name, basically Mycroft Holmes, because he's a Holmes 4 computer. And so he gives the name Mycroft, which is Sherlock's brother. And he befriends Mike, and they become friends. And along the way, he comes across two characters, Wyoming Knott and Professor Bernardo de la Paz, and they get immersed into potentially starting a revolution. And basically, Manny uses his sort of computer knowledge to realize that he could bring in Mike as basically the main collaborator, the main architect of this revolution, and avoid a lot of the historical problems that have come up with revolutions, a lot of cells that, the infiltrators, they could break up. And so it's a perfect storm, essentially, of basically the warden. It's the warden's own computer that's being used against him to plot this revolution. He's very loyal. Mike's very loyal to his friends. And, even if I think the warden had the passcodes, he wouldn't, allow them to get, his protected memory banks with, his conversations with Manny. And it's a compelling story. There's a revolution. There's a war between Earth and the moon. Essentially, people are like, probably should back up a little bit. What are the main purposes of the lunar colony is to grow grain to support the people back on Earth. And what they do is...
But it's also a penal colony. So the people who were originally sent there were prisoners.
Right, exactly. Manny himself is an authentic Looney. He's somebody that wasn't shipped, wasn't transported. He grew up there, but they still get transportees all the time. The Lunar Authority, their job is to oversee the prison, make sure that the people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is growing the grain and shipping it back to Earth. But what Mike helps them realize is that they're destroying their own ecology by doing this. It's not sustainable. They figure there's going to be starvation riots on the moon within a certain number of years, the finite number of years, if they don't take action and overthrow the authority, because the authority is bleeding them dry. And so they have no choice but to do this. And so the people on Earth, it's like, what are you going to do? Throw rocks? No, they throw grain. And so they don't have to send the grain tubes down in a controlled, environment. They can
Right.
just launch them. And they also can load up the catapult with rocks, and they do that. And the kinetic energy of a grain barge landing on a plane in India, as this happens in the book, is equivalent to a nuclear explosion. It's just the sheer kinetic energy of it. But it's not nuclear. It's pure kinetic energy. And so they're initially accused of throwing nukes. Like, no, those weren't nukes. Those were just grain and rock.
It wasn't Earth that accused them of throwing nukes. It was people on the moon, the Loonies. They call themselves the Loonies, who accused the military of throwing nukes when it was just grain.
Partly, I think there was also some misapprehension. I think of people initially on the ground.
You see a mushroom cloud,
you assume
you're
it's
going to take a nuclear bomb.
Right.
I actually picked up this book like 20 years ago or so, and actually listened to the same recording or same audiobook because I used to listen to books while I was working. And the same thing that struck me then as it strikes me now is this, because I'm like 58. So I lived through the whole Cold War period, well, the tail end of it, and not the 60s and not the 60 part or the 50 or the 60 part. I was always struck at how this book was in 66 and how it like almost promotes a communist takeover of a revolution. It keeps on saying revolution, and the accents, and I'm surprised. I was like surprised how this even back then when I was listening to how this got through in a Cold War era. What I was explaining to Candace a couple days ago or so, that we have a whole new generation of, like, my daughter, not a new generation, but a previous generation now, from millennials to my daughter and so on, that has no recollection of living in a post 9/11 world.
Pre 9/11 world.
And the and these pre-level 9/11 world. And these books and even Star Trek, the original Star Trek, what I'm saying, it captures history. It's like a time capsule. I have a feeling if this book was made today in a movie, that they would destroy it. And what I mean by destroy it is that basically just the basic sci-fi stuff. The sci-fi stuff is that there's still newspapers. They're always talking to each other on a landline. That is part of the book. That is part of the it's kind of like the play. It's kind of like when they try to take Shakespeare and move it and modernize it. And by doing so, they're trying to relate to the audience. And by doing so, it takes away from it. And so this book is actually a perfect time capsule of 1966. Because it basically, the author is taking what's around him at that present moment, and like true sci-fi, projecting it to in the future. And the thing is that the computer and Manny and the relationships and starting a revolution, and how many basically cells they can have, and this, that, and the other thing. Even back then, I'm going, my God, this is a 101 guide to basically revolution. If anybody picks this up. And what I also remarked was, as I'm listening today, after like 20, 25 years, how much this is actually today. Like, I'm looking out my window. I mean, this applies as well as today. What I'm trying to get is that the moon is literally, he used the moon in the sci-fi, and this is literature. This is not just regular sci-fi writing.
Right.
Okay. This is literature. And he's taken the moon and he used it as a metaphor. Okay.
Right.
I mean, this could be Brazil.
Right.
Or the United States, or any other country.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of good sci-fi does that, where it takes the world that existed at the time and extrapolates it into the particular world of the author's imagination. In this case, he created a lunar authority, so it's a fully fleshed out Earth government. He created the concept of this lunar colony. He created a society on the moon that is very pro-feminism, very pro individual rights, and also self-reliance. There's a There's certain, I was rereading some stuff looking at critical reception of this book, and some people credit this book as inspiring things like the Hacker's Manifesto, which is, the idea of revolution. And it popularized the phrase Tanstoffel, which is there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. It, basically says, there's cause and effect for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So there's they might be providing you a free lunch, but the free lunch is covered by some other cost somewhere in the system. The Earth was trying to get free grain, but they were draining the moon dry to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, basically...
They were not being good stewards of the land.
Exactly. So there's a lot of metaphors, things like that, that can be, expanded out to that. I think what attracted me a lot to this book initially when I first read it as a youth was the humor, the sort of the plucky nature. Ultimately, good prevails. But not without cost. Yeah, there's a lot of bad things that happen to people on the moon.
But I don't think that any of it is intentional. Well, on the part of the lunar colony, none of the things that they do is intentional.
Right.
They don't mean to cause the harm that they cause to the Earth, whereas the Earth does mean to cause the harm that they cause to the moon.
Right.
What it was always a kicker, like you said, humor. I don't know if this is dark humor, is that they warned them over and over and over. It's just like, we're gonna shoot right there.
Now, right there is a lens into humanity. This part.
This is the target. All right, we're gonna hit right there, and people show up to look at the target.
Yeah,
with their
picnic baskets. Little signs like "hit me."
With their picnic baskets, yeah.
And then after that, they blame moon.
Right.
And I'm going, yeah, that's about right. That's how that would work. That's exactly how that would work.
I want to touch on the feminism part of it before we move on further and I forget. So I was listening to the book, and my daughter, who is 27, could hear the book too, and she kept making comments about how sexualized the women in the story were, and I had to remind her that this is a book. That this is actually a woman forward book, a pro woman book, written in 1966. So it's written with the lens of a man in 1966.
Yeah, it's also
a
Heinlein
feminist
too.
in 2026 would not call this a feminist book.
Right.
However, at the time that it was written, it was.
Right.
And
yeah, well, you
But
have,
if
kind
it
of
were-
have to know
yeah.
Heinlein and know some of his other books to know he's a very much pro free love kind of person. If you ever read Stranger in a Strange Land or The Cat Who Walks Through Walls or
But
some of these
his
other...
concepts of marriage in this book are just fascinating. And
Oh,
actually,
right.
some of the ideas are really good ideas from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, right. The concept of the line marriage, for example.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Manny's part of what's called a line marriage. He's been part into a family. There's a senior wife and a senior husband, and they have a series of junior husbands, and they raise kids. After a certain point, they get kicked out. The kids get opted out into other families. But occasionally they do vote and, bring people in. And, basically this marriage has lasted for, 80 years, something like that.
Yeah.
100 years.
100 years,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and he expects it to last a long time after him. And I think it does, because one of the characters in the book is later, she's in The Cat Who Walks Through Walls.
So there's books that follow this story after this book. Kind of, but not really.
They're not true sequels. It's just there's little bon mots or homages. Mike appears much later on as part of the Lazarus Long series of books. Basically,
I was worried about Mike.
Right. I think if I remember right, the reason that Manny can't talk to Mike after that is after the Lunar Revolution is that Lazarus has gone there and has extracted Mike and brought him with him on his ship to travel through time with him. You'd kind of have to know the Lazarus Long series of books. Lazarus Long is a whole nother series, a whole nother topic. They get really, really weird after a while.
I was going to thank you for not having time travel in this story, because every single book we've listened to for the first season, it was all time travel. No time travel. There'll probably be more time
in this
travel.
one.
Yeah. Back to the story. I have a couple of questions for you, Kevin.
Sure.
Because first of all, you are a cyber law expert, and basically this revolution the mastermind of it was a computer. So
Mhm.
how does humanity protect themselves from a computer taking over the world?
Oh, that's a good question.
Legally.
Legally, right. So in this case, you had Manny, who was the computer tech, who was aware of, what was being done, and even he was kind of surprised at the things that Mike would do. Basically, at one point, they have an election, and oddly enough, their percentage of candidates won the election. Now, they didn't win them all. They didn't want to make it obvious. Oddly enough, like they got it through, and that was because they trusted the main computer of the thing to handle the voting. And so you look at some of the allegations these days for voter issues and things like that. It comes down to, do you trust the computers, to do the jobs that they're doing here.
I think it
A
has to
lot
do
of
with,
the
do you trust the programmer? But
Right, exactly. I was sort of getting to that is like I think in the case of like an election, I think then you have to have like some sort of an election body that oversees the programming and sees uh, the code that does the tallying, and that there's some sort of oversight. Trust but verify is probably the way I'd go there. And similarly to that with programming, you see people these days, they want to do vibe coding, and they think that just because they vibe coded their way to a platform that does something doesn't mean it's necessarily perfect. They may have inadvertently put in backdoors that left a security loop open for something else. You just don't know what else is, inadvertently in that code. And so that's another example of, trust but verify. So
I know people who
it's,
are vibe coding all the time and putting out these apps and stuff that they've vibe coded. And now that you've said that, I'm afraid to use them.
yeah. Well, you hope that that there isn't like some sort of inadvertent backdoor on them. But yeah, that's sort of the issues with that. We have an example in here in this book of the Professor De La Paz, who was a very cynical view of authoritative structures. The original title for the book before he came up with The Moon is a Harsh Mistress was The Brass Cannon. And there's an analogy in the book for the person that the job all his life he worked for the authority, and he spent all his days polishing the authority's brass cannon. And when he got his independence, what did he do? He went out and bought himself his own brass cannon and started polishing it himself at home,
Mm-hmm.
rather than having an independent thought and what do I want to do with my life when I'm not, out there. And that was the original title for the book. And then he came up with The Moon is a Harsh Mistress when working with his publisher, from what I understand.
And that's not even the exact quote from the book. The exact quote from the book is the moon is a something else mistress, not harsh.
Right.
Fickle or something like that, yeah. So
Right. Exactly.
so people are always looking for that Easter egg. They want the title of the book in the text, and when you
Hmm.
find it and it's not exactly the same as the title, you're like, "What?"
Right.
So
Right.
now I want to go in the direction of the world that Heinlein imagined, because in 1966 we had not landed on the moon yet. We landed on the moon in 1969. And in Heinlein's book, he is talking about a family who had been on the moon for 100 years, which meant in 1975 we started colonizing the moon.
Right.
6 years after we landed on it. So this world that he imagined, first of all, whenever I read books that were written before 1980 and the future that they imagine, I'm like, gosh, I wish that we had ended up that way. Like, I don't understand why we never went back to the moon. I don't understand that at all.
Hmm.
So this whole thing about having been on the moon for 100 years is this world that just, I mean, we haven't even been back to the moon in any substantial way since 1975 or something like that.
Yeah,
So
supposedly we'll be doing that soon, from what I understand.
Yeah.
At least a flyby soon.
Where's my damn flying cars?
they're in China. China actually has flying cars that are in service now.
That's what you want to. So I remember being a little boy in the 70s, right, early late 70s, and I'd go through the encyclopedia and I'd go through the lunar landings and everything else because they would have the photographs, pictures, and then they would have like, oh, this is what we're planning on to doing later on with the sci-fi and cities on the moon and this, that, and the other thing. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said it best. The USSR was our best motivator.
Hmm.
That's why we did it. That's
Right.
we wouldn't went on the moon if it wasn't for the Russians. Now think about that.
Hmm.
After the fall of Russians, look at the space program. Look what happened.
Yeah, I agree.
I
I'm
just
kind
don't
of
think we
looking
hear
forward.
about it as much. I mean, we've
Well,
got this.
because we are a sports team nation. Look at us.
Oh, yeah. So it's
We
not.
have to
It's
have a
because
side.
there's so much collaboration going on in the ISS and in space exploration right now. It's a
Nobody's
very
winning.
collaborative thing. It's not a winners or losers thing. You're right. You're right.
Mhm.
Society likes winners and losers.
We
Right.
are a sports society. We're cowboys
Right.
and Indians. We're
Oh, yeah.
North and South. If we don't have that, look what we're doing to each other now.
We make it
Right.
up.
We have to have an external enemy.
Right.
And that's not just the United States. That's pretty much majority of all societies.
It's
Is
humanity.
that you have to have a reason to build the wall.
Yeah.
Because in a sense,
Yeah.
the book is that's why I said the book is a perfect time capsule,
Right.
because it does mimic the time period of what that was.
Right. Yeah. And here you've got the disconnect between the Lunar Authority and the Loonies. Yeah. So there is that big bad authority, but neither one was necessarily doing things wrong. Like the Lunar Authority was doing its best to try to feed the starving people on Earth, and saw the moon as a place to get essentially free grain from. And we could just ship our convicts up there, get them out of our hair, and they'll be exiled there. They can never come back. That's another interesting thing is, what happens when loonies come back to Earth, and, somebody, especially like Manny, who had never, lived in gravity, he has to train for, at one point they send a delegation of himself and the professor down to try to negotiate, and doesn't really go as well as expected. And it wasn't until they get shipped back when,
I think it went exactly the way that it was expected.
Mike tells him it went exactly the way it had to go. It's just we couldn't tell you in advance that that this was not going to go well. We had to lift you up so you would do it. But
Right.
but they had to try.
If I was in this book, I
Yeah.
would want to live on the moon. It
Mhm.
just seems like a much better place to live. There's independence.
Right.
They're self-reliant.
Yeah, so, like his version of feminism is basically, the women can, strut around and look pretty and look sexy and do this stuff, and they are completely safe. They will never be touched anywhere because they know that the rest of the civilization, if one man does something untoward, the rest of them will kill him, because women are such a precious commodity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one woman
Yeah.
for every 20 men.
That kind of goes back to the prehistoric days, though, where basically one tribe would go attack the other tribe and steal their women.
Yeah, right.
Because they are precious
yeah,
commodities.
it's basically his version of feminism.
So
It's
the way
not
you
the
just
modern
described
one.
it isn't, in my opinion, feminism, but
Right,
safety, because they were a treasured commodity. And I mean, you just
Right.
described
It's-
women
it's
as a
his
commodity.
version.
Yeah.
Well, it's his version of it. It's a 1966 version of feminism. I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
trying to
No,
explain what's in the book.
We always have to bring it back to relativity. So
Right,
the other
exactly.
thing, the other thing I want to touch on is kind of like when we were talking about the ISS. In this future, 2075, in this future in this book, the Earth has sort of created an Earth-wide government.
Mm-hmm.
There's still individual countries, but it's kind of like the EU where they work together. Let's chat about that. Is that
Yes.
something that we think that could happen on this planet?
Well, the United Nations was a move towards that, but I don't think it ever got to the point where the United Nations has any teeth to dictate. It's not the extent of the world government that you see in this particular book. I just don't think there's going to be a significant enough impetus, to give them more teeth, but it potentially could happen. And I could see, I'm sure other people have written books, that, can extrapolate on this point a little bit more. But I think this one, he's put it out there as something that he was hoping that, by 2075 that we would have worked this out. But obviously we haven't exactly done so, at least
We
not
still
by
have 50 years.
2026.
We have 50 years. We might figure this out.
I think that the problem with humanity as a general is that I hate to go back to this all the time, but it has to have an external and external threat or enemy for to be united. And that seems to be it seems to be that's the kumbaya moment. Is even in our own colonies, is that they had to get together to kick out the British, right? Even in World War II, you have to get together to defeat Nazi. We're going to have the same problem too. And even in Hello Mary,
Hello, Dolly.
no, Mary, the
Hail
Oh,
Mary.
Hail
Hail
Mary.
Mary,
Project Hail Mary.
Hail Mary, all right? There was an external threat, and that's what brought the countries together to give this one woman all this power. So basically,
Yeah, she can ship him off to do this,
yeah, yeah, because everything else would be basically getting in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you're going to have a unified like Star Trek moment per se without the Klingons. Okay.
Mm.
All right.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're always, and as for the UN, I don't think it had to do with teeth. I think it was basically, you had a lot of, when it was formed, you had the people with the guns making the rules.
Well,
And
those are the ones that are on the Security Council now, right?
Yeah. And they will never give up those guns.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Unless they become,
Mm-hmm.
all right, the authority itself, where people again unite, all right, to basically overthrow them again.
Right.
And it seems like it's a cycle scenario we got going.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
unless you have an external threat,
Mm-hmm.
all right,
or even internal threat. Look at what happened with. If you know much about Star Trek, that it wasn't just us versus the Klingons. What it was there was the eugenics wars, that the Federation,
that's right.
was founded, to rebuild society after Khan. The Khan character, the one from Space Seed that went
Augments.
on for
Augments.
yes, exactly. Basically, that was the only thing that they rebuilt Earth from, and then they expanded that outward to other nations after they met the Vulcans, their first contact. If you watch that one,
Well, yes,
Of course we did.
It's always an external scenario. Well, even today, our government, everybody else's government, somebody else's government, they all try to pick somebody to basically, okay, how can we get our people to rally around something, even if it's a false flag or even something we have to come up with or this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because people willingly will not build a pyramid, okay? All right? Unless there's a reason to build that pyramid,
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously the reason of knowledge and happiness and arts is not enough for the human race. We have to have death and destruction at our door.
Death and despair. Okay. So, Kevin, one of the things that you wanted to talk about when you picked this book was what it means to be not stupid. And I find this really compelling.
I love that.
I find it really compelling because Mike the computer basically thought most people were stupid and he wanted to talk to not stupid people. And he didn't say intelligent people, he just said not stupid. So what does that mean?
Yeah, somebody who's not stupid in Mike's parlance is someone who has independent thought and is able to form a rational argument. Also, somebody with a sense of humor. That's a good part of it there. At one point, Mike introduces Wyoming Knott. I was hoping to talk about her a little bit more. She's one of the stronger women characters in the book.
Yeah.
And basically, Mike's thrilled because he's able to talk to another not stupid. And Manny goes to sleep and he wakes up the next morning and Y is talking to a female voice. And while
Michelle.
Michelle, it wasn't until who are you talking to? Like, basically, she figured out overnight that Mike had, the way based on his answers to certain jokes, was more female than male, and came up with an alternate personality that when she calls and talks to Mike, Michelle answers. So, the interface is different for that. And what I like about this book is just the quirky human nature part of this is that it's through humor, it's through sharing of life experiences that these not stupids are found. Where somebody it's the kind of person that you probably want to go off and grab a beer with. It's a good way to I guess filter through people, is to think through, are they sort of not quite to the level of a Dune where you've got the test with the Bene Gesserit,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the Gom Jabbar, whether or not you're human or not, but simply a much more calmer, rational way of being able to figure out whether or not somebody's not stupid.
What the word that came to my mind was somebody who would listen and understand. So a stupid person, and we're all guilty of it, will talk right through it, dot, 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 and not listen.
Mm-hmm.
So a not stupid person, in my opinion, is somebody you can have a conversation with on equal parts, kind of thing. And not somebody who would either overtalk you or this. And we've all done that. And as we get older, we kind of like, it's best to just keep my mouth shut and listen, because how can you gain knowledge if you're always talking, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a cyber law expert, what do you think will happen if we put too much faith into computers as a society?
I think there's a lot more safeguards that need to be put into place. The EU, for example, they've proposed certain restrictions on AI policies and things like that. That I think is a good first step towards reining in and some sort of a governance body overseeing and making sure that we don't wake up and the next morning we've got they've become self-aware or something like that. But a lot of people don't realize is what we think of as this artificial intelligence isn't true consciousness. It's more predictive word generation. So it's a much different type of, it's not true intelligence per se. It's not like the AI in this book where Mike was able to have independent thought and was able to rationalize and realize, where, his loyalties really were, which was, with the moon. Partly I think because that's where, his computer was based. But also that's where his friends were. It's he'd made friends and live or died with them. And
And
so yeah.
the way that he expressed his feelings for his friends, hello, man, my only friend. Hello, Wyoming, my first female friend.
Mhm.
Hello, Professor, my new friend.
My second friend or
My
something like
Second
second
that.
friend,
friend.
yes.
Yeah.
It was very, that value of friendship was very important to him as a
Mhm.
computer, as an artificial intelligence, which AI today is not that.
No.
It's not that. I mean, as someone who uses AI daily, it's dumb. It's really
Right.
dumb.
Right. 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 It's just predictive text. It knows what the next word in sequence is likely to be based on what it's been trained on.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't true intelligence. That's guessing.
All right, Kevin, first of all, I'd like you to share with the audience, if they're interested in joining the book club, a little bit about your book club.
Sure. I formed this club as a way for myself to find new books to read and to sort of sharpen my own saw. And right now we have over 300 members in the club.
Wow.
And we have less than that show up and vote, and less than that show up and come to meetings.
I'm guessing 3. No,
The
I'm just
last one we
kidding.
had 7, which was
Whoa.
good. It's a good
That's still a
discussion.
lively conversation about a book.
It was a great discussion, and brings people from all across the U.S. I try to host it usually the third Tuesday in the evening from 5:00 Central Time, and we get together over Teams and talk through for an hour.
So what are you reading right now?
This month, we have The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I believe that's this month's book. We just finished reading Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang, which was really interesting book.
The link to the book club is in the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin, talk about your cyber law business.
Yeah, so I'm with Levin Ginsberg. We're a general business law firm here in Chicago, and I'm their IP guy. And what that means is I help people protect their brands, both domestically and internationally, both from a trademark as well as a copyright, as well as from a data privacy standpoint. So from the trademark side, basically trademarks to be both a sword and as a shield, a sword against infringers, but a shield as you're ramping up to do business to making sure that nobody can come out of the woodwork saying, that's our name. That's the name of our Sci-Fi Book Pod. You must cease and desist from using that name for the name of your show.
I checked and triple checked.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what you have common law rights, but there's certain additional rights you get from having a registration, which is nice to put people on notice of your rights and so forth. I do that for both a lot of individuals as well as small businesses, as large businesses as well. And it's just a lot of fun helping creative people do fun things. So I've been practicing here in Chicago for about 26 years. I've been at my current firm for about the last 4, and just really like helping creative people.
Kevin has been on Gratitude Geek, my other podcast. It was episode 237 where we talked about copyright law during a time of AI. So if you are interested in that, please do check out that episode. The link will be in the show notes, as will the link to Kevin's practice. All right, Kevin, who should be reading or listening to this book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress?
Well, this is a true classic. This is I was actually watching a podcast recently where somebody looked at all the 1960s Hugo Award winners, and this is one of the ones that I think that stood out as one that's still kind of relevant today. Just the depiction of this lunar society, dealing with the AI topics. It's still a great read. It's a fun read. So I think people really get a lot of fun reading this book. And again, it's one I pick up every few years, and I still enjoy a little romp and little time with Manny and Mike and Wyoming and the professor.
That is a wrap on season 2, episode 2. I've been Space Admiral Kandas.
I'm Shane, Space Cadet, second class.
And I'm Kevin Thompson.
And you have been listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod.